All right. Well, we're going to start off here today with my conference call with Jana Swanson. She is the leader of the Coalition for Rural Property Rights, and she was wanting to attend our meeting to talk to everybody personally in Iowa County, but due to time constraints, she was not able to, and so here she is to talk to us. Hi, Jana.
Hi, Iowa County.
So Jana, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got kind of started with the coalition and your role in wind turbine uh, advocacy, I guess.
Okay, well, in 2013, a company came to us and they wanted to put a transmission line, a large 200-foot line to our property, and that was the Rock Island Clean Line. It's a wind energy power line, and we formed a group here called the Preservation of Rural Iowa Alliance, and we fought it all the way to the legislature and got a bill passed that these companies that are private companies could not be putting these large transmission lines through our property and getting eminent domain to do it. Um, During that time, we learned a lot about the wind industry because it was a wind energy power line. And the moment our bill passed, I went and found these other people in the next county, in Palo Alto County, that were fighting the the wind installation that they were proposing over there, and I went and joined them. Us together, we started the Coalition for Rural Property Rights,
Hmm.
and then it just grew and grew from there. We originally were with Southern Minnesota, but we've kind of broken off from them just because Iowa laws and Minnesota laws are so different. Um, so we have collected now people from all across the state, many different counties, and we try as much as we possibly can to work together.
Awesome, awesome. So, I don't even really recall how we even got connected through all of this, but somehow we got connected, and you've been a really great resource for especially I think with past examples, past counties, what's happened, what hasn't happened, and the good and the bad with wind energy coming to a county. So it's been really helpful to have you as a resource, and everybody that's on this team has been really helpful.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a great people all the way across the state, and
yes.
I happen to end up being the face of it, which I've tried to give off to a number of people. Nobody wants it, but I get information fed to me from all across the state. So what you're hearing out of my mouth comes from all around the United States, all around the world, and all around Iowa.
Okay, awesome. So I guess if I'm going to start off with our first question, I'd like to start kind of broad and maybe address your main concerns with the wind energy in Iowa County or coming into any county. But you kind of know more about our ordinance, how we don't have one yet, and how we already have an agreement with Diamond Trail Project, but we're just trying to protect against future projects. Can you give us maybe some of your top concerns with what's going on here?
Well, I think that the wind industry, they know that there are negative impacts from wind turbines on surrounding residents, and they know this. They hand out a neighbor agreement. Anybody that lives within a half a mile, and probably with your turbines, even a little bit more than a half a mile from any wind turbine, and they list the negative impacts in those contracts, so they're well aware of them. And see, this is our problem, is that a lot of the landowners that sign up say, well, we can do whatever we want to on our own property. And I always say, well, as long as it doesn't cross the property line. But it is obviously crossing the property line if the wind companies want to give those people a hold harmless agreement and pay them money in order to put up with the negative impacts. Because if they're building in your community, your supervisors have already given them the right to push those negative impacts off on you. So if you don't sign the contract, you still get the negative impacts. But if you sign one of their contracts, they also get an easement over your entire property. And then you also don't have the right to sue them. at a later date. And if you do sue them, it will go through a moderator and not through a jury trial.
Okay, yes, that's kind of was my understanding as well with everything, and been kind of our major concern as well with having people sign up ground and then the neighbors are also affected. So that's a really great point to bring up. To go along with another broad category question that we had from some Facebook users, could you give some of the benefits and drawbacks of wind energy?
Well, the benefits of wind energy really are overstated. They talk about bringing money to the community, but when you start talking about the negative impacts, you say, well, they might be bringing tax money to the community, but they're going to hurt our roads with their very large overweight loads. They're going, and we're going to end up paying for that later. And our property values are going to drop. And I know the wind industry will say that our property values don't drop, but when most everybody that lives within a wind installation doesn't want to live within a wind installation, what does that say for the resale value of your home?
Mhm.
It's a no-brainer. I don't care how many we have studies that show that the property values do drop. They have studies that show that they don't drop, but a lot of their studies go out at least 10 miles around the wind installation in order to dilute what's going to happen right next to those turbines.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Um,
and then of course we're paying for all of the wind turbines, 100% of the wind turbines through taxes. The production tax credit, and Mid-American has admitted this right in an interview in the Des Moines Register that 100% of the cost of building wind turbines will all be paid for through our taxes. And sometimes I like to say, well, if we've paid for the cost of the turbines and the fuel is free,
mhm.
why are we paying for wind energy at all? But they don't see it that way.
And maybe you
I
could extrapolate on the increase in the bills that people see because of
well,
wind.
yeah, Alliant just increased their bills by their rates by 24.9%, and a lot of people are very upset about that, and have also come to our meetings, and because they're starting to see that this is going to hurt us in a lot of different ways. And Mid-American will say, well, our rates haven't gone up. But in 2015, the Iowa Utilities Board said, you need to give some of that money you're getting back to the ratepayers. And because they're taking all the risk, 100% of the risk. And Mid-American went to Governor Branstad at the time and said, we are looking forward to working with a new Iowa Utilities Board. And Sheila Tipton, who was one of the lawyers that was working on the Iowa Utilities Board, was removed from the Iowa Utilities Board, and Jerry Huser was put in the chair position. And the reason we know this is because Sheila Tipton wrote an open letter to Branstad, and it was published in the Des Moines Register and also in Bleeding Heartland. So I think that Mid-American really is controlling so much of the IUB, and that tax credit is the only reason that our rates haven't gone up. But eventually, that tax credit is going to be gone. And I know that especially Senator Grassley likes to say that that tax credit is going away, and that gives you the idea that wind energy is standing on its own, but it's not, because the tax credit beginning is going away. This next year, they will still be able to get 100% of that production tax credit because of a mechanism called safe harbor, and you can look that up. And it was something that they put together so that if these companies spent 5% of the cost of building the wind turbines, then they would be able to extend that 100% of tax credit for 4 years. And now also, our Iowa electric co-ops, they can't afford to build wind turbines. They
Mhm.
are tax exempt. And so this tax credit deal does nothing for them, and they can't afford to to build wind turbines, not new wind turbines. And the ones that they have were also 100% paid for by the government. So for them to say that this is cost effective is wrong. Now also realize that when they put in all these wind turbines, they also have to put in new transmission. And the new transmission running from the wind installations, the new transmission that they're going to have to use to get a lot of this energy out of the state eventually. So, and I know that they are selling some of it out of the state already, but as the utility companies build transmission lines, they charge us for that, and they get a guaranteed rate of return. So if they build transmission lines, we do have to pay that. We are contracted to pay that. The IUB will make sure that we do. And it doesn't matter if eventually our rates go up. We have said that we will pay that. So there's a lot of issues that people are not thinking about as far as the long term.
And yeah, I totally agree.
Abby, you said something about, because we were talking about the pros of wind energy, and you said, well, we don't have to burn coal and things like that. But what I'm seeing is that wind energy is it always has to have a backup. In Iowa, the wind only blows strong enough to have wind energy about a third of the time.
Well, it makes sense. The wind dies down at night, so
or it doesn't blow enough, or it blows too much, or it doesn't blow at the right times when we need it. So when the wind isn't blowing enough or too much or at the right time or whatever, we always have natural gas usually to back us up, or the nuclear or coal or all of these things. And so wind energy is always wind energy plus the fossil fuels that it takes to back them up when they're not working. And for example, in Iowa, we are closing the Duane Arnold nuclear plant, and that was no emissions. Well, we're replacing it with wind turbines, which means we're replacing it with wind turbines and natural gas, which means that there will be more carbon emissions when we close the Duane Arnold than if we have wind turbines. Do you understand?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And then also the American Wind Energy Association, their largest boast, and if you go on their website, you can see this, that they say that they cut 189 million metric tons of CO2 with wind turbines. Worldwide, I believe that is what their boast is. Worldwide, 189 million metric tons. But worldwide, the amount of CO2 created by mankind is from the Carbon Project, which is so very concerned about CO2 emissions, and they're saying that emissions in billion metric tons, not million, billion, reaches between 35 and 40 billion metric tons every year. This is from fossil fuels and cement emissions and land use. And now, wind energy is a lot of cement use. There's like 2 million pounds of cement per turbine base. And cement, I don't know if you knew this, emits 0.9% pounds of CO2 per pound of cement. So almost pound for pound, cement emits as much CO2 as what's in the ground of cement. So that was unclear, but what I'm saying is that wind turbines, even if we doubled the amount of wind turbines that we have now in the world, we still would not reach past 1% of the man-made CO2 on the earth. So, And I don't know if they add in all of the emissions that it takes from manufacturing them and things like that. But in Iowa, and I have a chart I can or I can send you the link to it. You'll see that Iowa's carbon emissions increased in the power sector between 2016 and 2017, with a ton of wind turbines going. And if you notice too, that same year in our industrial sector, our emissions went up 30%, probably from making wind turbines.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more like wind turbines are pushing off the emissions on other industry
Mm-hmm.
and claiming themselves to be green and clean.
Yes. Yes. That makes sense. And that's what I've understood, even talking to some of the people that are within an electric company, maybe not the wind energy company, but within electric companies and saying the same thing, that
Yeah,
they're not exactly green or clean, even though they can seem that way.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And yeah, so there's a lot more to this, but they have a very great spiel, a clean, slick, green spiel, and it's just not that way.
yes. Okay, I have two more questions that I think I want to cover. The first one, kind of going back to talking about the power lines that are eventually going to have to come through with these. Um, Eminent domain. We know the Supreme Court just voted on the Dakota Access Pipeline, which has precedence for this. Thoughts on that? And is that a real threat in Iowa County, or is that just some big scary word that we don't need to worry about?
Well, if you've signed a wind lease agreement, wind easement agreement, you have already given them permission to come over your land power line. Almost every contract every contract I've ever read says that you might get a wind turbine, but you might not, but that you have given them permission to put transmission on your ground, whether it is this project or any other project.
Mm-hmm.
You've also given them permission to put on batteries and roads for that, and the contracts never say that they need to pay you any more for any of this.
Yeah, the
Okay.
transmission line in our contracts that I've read for our area, you do get a small amount more, but it's definitely not the amount that they promise that with a turbine going on your property.
Yeah. And so basically what I'm saying is that if the farm over here signed a wind turbine contract and the farm over here signed a wind turbine contract and you're in the middle and you didn't sign one and now they want to put a power line through, they're going to take your land by eminent domain. That is what you need to worry about. And yes, they do need more transmission. Iowa is congested with now all these wind turbines, and they need to be able to move this energy out. And that's what I said. We fought the Rock Island Clean Line because they wanted to move wind energy out of Iowa over to Chicago. If you look up on the Clean Line Energy Partners, which was part of the Rock Island Clean Line, they also had the Grain Belt Express down. You've probably heard of that down in Missouri.
Hmm.
They had the Plains and Eastern Line, and those were all being fought by landowners.
Okay.
All right.
So my next question I think would be what comments or what can you say about the opposition against wind energy across the state, across the United States, across the world? Are we like the only ones like this crazy county that wants to fight it, or is this like a common thing?
Oh my gosh, wind opposition is huge. There are over 227 governments in the United States that have banned or blocked industrial wind already. Take, for example, in Vermont, they have said you can only be as loud as 39 decibels, 100 feet from any residence, and that pretty much shut down industrial wind in Vermont.
Hmm.
Um, and in Michigan, they've started taking referendum votes. And every time they do a referendum vote, the people get to vote and they vote out wind energy. Um, Indiana, lots of different counties, right? All in the middle of the state that have said no. now to wind energy. And I was just talking to, one of my friends last night is leading all of that charge. So, no, the opposition is actually very, very normal. And around in Iowa, all the different groups and all the different people that I talk to all the way around Iowa, it is about 10% of the people that live within a proposed installation that will sign contracts. The rest of them do not want it and they will not sign. And sometimes they all get backed into a corner. I've had people say that they thought that it was a good thing and they signed. Now they wish they wouldn't have signed. People are depressed, things that are happening to their ground. They never wanted. These companies are not doing a good thing for your community. And the setbacks are, I mean, there's in other countries, in Germany, they have about 1,000 wind opposition groups in Germany, and they're having a hard time building anywhere now. In Poland, they had so much opposition that they have now said, okay, no more onshore wind turbines, and all of them that are standing will be gone by 2035, I think it is what they've said.
Mm-hmm.
So there are so many places fighting industrial wind, and what makes me very angry about Iowa is that we are not allowed to fight industrial wind. We can do what you see right now, but the powers that be have not. We don't have a right of referendum. We don't have the right of recall. We don't even now have the Iowa Utilities Board. The Iowa Utilities Board is supposed to oversee, and that any power plant is supposed to go through the Iowa Utilities Board approval process, and any wind installation over 25 megawatts is supposed to go through the Iowa Utilities Board process. But they started to say, oh no, that even if you have a huge installation that is 180 megawatts, that they're only going to look at the amount of turbines on a collecting line. So if they can have a collecting line that's 25 megawatts or under, they don't have to go through the Iowa Utilities Board. So what they're saying is that Mid-American and the like can cover the entire state of Iowa with wind turbines and not go through any regulation, not have to have the voice of the people, not have to prove that they're needed.
Okay, so the last question that I think I have for you has to do with the future projects that could come in the county. Because, like I said, we're already done with the Diamond Trail Wind Energy Project. It's been decided on with the supervisors. However, like you said, the tax credits are not done yet. They are going to probably continue to come into our county because we don't have zoning, so we're a perfect match for them. It makes a lot less work and time and money for them. So for people who have not been asked yet for an easement, if a company comes in and wants to put a turbine up or get the easement over the ground to do whatever they want with it, what are your thoughts and recommendations for them?
So basically you're asking me, the people that have not signed a wind turbine contract yet, what my thoughts and recommendations for them would be is to never sign a wind turbine contract.
Can you explain why though?
The contracts, basically I can say that I have a friend that helped start the coalition, and he farms a lot of ground. I've never asked him exactly, but I think it's around 15,000 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And he took the contract to his attorney, and his attorney looked at it and said, don't ever sign anything like this.
Mm-hmm.
You are giving away so much by signing one of these contracts. And I know that in this world, we are so used to just, oh, all right, well, okay, it says this and that and the other thing. And I'll just, because the way they explain it, oh, we're just going to take a little bit of ground and we're going to put a little tiny wind turbine on it, and you're going to get a check, and anything that we destroy, we're going to give you money for that and stuff. Well, farmers will tell you that sure, they'll pay you for crop loss for maybe like the first or second year, and they'll cut you a check. And it's not about the amount of crop that you lost. It's just, well, here's a check for that. And basically, after you sign the contract, you need to do whatever they say, and do it the way that they say. It like in Edgar County, my friend John Williams, who Mid-American knows, they
Mhm.
ruined 20 acres of his ground. Ruined. They mixed the topsoil with clay layer, and they put huge ruts through the ground that compacted it. And he's never been able to grow anything on that. And and Mid-American, they want it. They'll sure they'll give him money, maybe about 10 or 15% of what it's worth. And that is kind of seems to be what they do in Davis County. Just recently, some people send me pictures of easement that Mid-American had for a power line, and they were making huge ruts and pouring concrete in them. And the ingress and egress, they were taking full advantage of that and going all over the farm, and creating all sorts of havoc and damage. And so they said, well, how much money do you think that it would cost to put this all back? And they said, well, close to like $90, $100. And they said, well, we'll give you $16,000 for it. And this is the kind of thing that they're just, I think that they're just taking advantage of people, and
Mhm.
people don't understand what is happening.
So,
Okay.
and a thought that I want to add to that is about Powesheik County, which is our neighboring county that they already have a turbine project in their county that's been in place for over a year now, I think. We're already seeing that promises not being kept. We see people that are not getting their payments on time, and there are people that are starting to sue them over this. But I think the problem is, I mean, this is all over the place, that with their easement that they signed the gag order, and so they're not allowed to talk about it, and they can't say that they're suing them, and they're guided by their legal counsel to not say anything about it because they could ruin their case. So I
Right.
think that's the hard part is, you and I know this is what's going to happen and that it's likely going to happen in our county, but we just know that it's not readily accessible or seen, or they can't be throwing a big public fit about it because they're not allowed to because they signed it. Is that your same thought on that?
Yeah, the gag orders have always been kind of a hard subject for me, because what I do know is that there's a number of people around Iowa that have had huge problems with the wind turbines. And what happens is that they go and they have a complaint against Mid-American, and Mid-American will offer them a settlement agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And that amount of money, whatever they settle with, they are also required to sign a non-disclosure agreement or a gag order. And a lot of the contracts that you see for wind turbines, the gag order really is only about the wind turbines, their operations, and the money that you get paid. Um, and so I'm not quite seeing that in the contract where they can't talk about it or talk negatively about it, even though I've heard that a lot. And down in Missouri, I know that I do have a friend that has seen contracts that do say that. And down in Oklahoma, there are contracts that say that if anybody ever takes the wind company to court, that that you are going to stand with the wind company. That's in
Mm-hmm.
your contract. Um, what the things that get me about the contracts, though, is that they say things, and in the contract, I can't believe anybody would sign this. They say if the tax incentives and the benefits ever go away, we can replace this contract with a new contract that will allow us to get tax incentives and benefits.
Yeah.
What? So you're signing a contract that they can completely replace?
Mm-hmm.
Why anybody would do that, why our governments would allow this, I mean, and basically they're putting it back on you and saying, you know what, you're an adult. You can read the contract and decide to sign or not.
Mm-hmm.
But people reading them and they're not understanding them. And they trust that Mid-American wouldn't do that to them.
So I know in our contract, I don't know about the tax part. I don't recall anything about that, but I'm going to look further into that. But I do know that ours, the ones that I've seen, do say something to the effect of that you cannot say anything to the detriment of the company. So I'm pretty sure that ours do have that part of the gag order in there.
Oh my. Well, Abby, I would like you to send that to me if you would, please.
Yes,
I would
yes,
love to see that.
yes, I'll send that over. Um,
Okay.
so I guess that answers all of my questions, and I really appreciate your time today. Do you have any final remarks or closing thoughts for us?
I know that the wind industry says that our opposition doesn't know what we're talking about and that we have a lot of misinformation. And oh, my favorite is that we're funded by the Koch brothers. And that's not true. We are all volunteers and we do this out of a passion for the truth. And the things that we say, we can back them up. We can back them up with documentation. We can, I mean, there's so much information out there. Now, the wind industry will say, well, it's all on the internet and you can't trust what you hear on the internet. But communities have done movies, they've done documentaries, they've begged and pleaded for people to please listen to them, the problems that they've had. And the wind industry, basically, Mark Zaccone, I think his name is. He's with Invenergy. I think he
Hmm.
comes down to your meetings. And in a Palo Alto supervisors meeting, I asked Mark one time, I said, please, Mark, tell me why there are so many websites and opposition groups and books and videos and movies and everything against industrial wind and talking about all these problems. And he turned to me and he said, they are all lying. Now, I don't think that thousands and thousands and thousands of people across the United States that just happen to live within industrial wind installations are lying.
And
Do you, Abby?
I have to totally agree with that because I know people from other counties personally that have come to me that actually are getting the money for the turbine, and they're still so upset with living next to it. They can't even stand it. And so I don't think that they're lying when their pocketbook's getting lined by the company for having it in the first place. I really don't. I have a hard time believing that they're lying.
Yeah, I mean, no, what they would have no reason to. And just because the wind industry, I can hear them, like I said, in the back of my head saying the things that they say, is that I know people too that live next to them that don't have a problem. I know people I like and that I trust that live next to them that don't have a problem. But
Hmm.
then again, the ones that are north of me are only 400 footers, and there's only 10 of them. And some of the people that live over there don't have a problem. And so there is that aspect of it too, that some people don't have a problem, but those are not the people I'm worried about. I'm worried about the people like up in the Bent Tree wind installation in southern Minnesota that just last year, Alliant was court ordered to buy their home and they had to move out of their home of 40 years
Hmm.
because of the wind turbines. No, they didn't take the wind turbines down. They basically took their home from them.
Hmm.
And I know a lot of people are probably like, well, they got paid for their home, but would you want to leave your home of 40 years because they put up a wind turbine across the road?
Hmm. Yeah. And I'm on
No.
the same page with you. It's easy to mitigate or minimize people's opinion on this because it's just opinion, or they're concerned because it's just a concern and maybe it's not validated by facts, quote unquote. But I think that that's why you and I are both here today to talk about this, for our Iowa County residents. It's because I want to give people the right to be concerned and validate that you have the right to be concerned, even if it's not backed up by facts, even if it's just that you don't want to look at it. I think that you still have the right to feel that way. And I don't think that you should just be shut down because you don't have the facts or you're, some conspiracy group.
Well, I believe that the wind industry has already said that that when they offer neighbor agreements, they've already said that you will have negative impacts. They've already admitted that. I don't know how they can say that that's not true because it is.
Hmm.
and they've already admitted it. So
Yes, I agree. Well, I thank you for your time today, and I know that you're really busy. You have a lot of people that you work with, so I think that on behalf of everybody in Iowa County, I'd like to thank you for your time and for your commitment to help us and all of your wisdom and advice, and it's just been really helpful.
well, I appreciate what you're doing too, and everybody that stands up against this, because we need to do that as a community together. So thank you, Abby.
Well, thank you.